Hello and welcome back to Coding with Unity. Today we'll be updating the code from our last project to be easier to read and work with. Currently, this is how our onDragIn function looks like. It works, besides the bug that we left off on in the last video, which we will fix in this video. So you can see it was easy to create a bug and hard to find the cause of the bug with such sloppy coding. But if we look at the project I've been working on, you'll see now it's really easy to read and figure out what's going on. So we can extend more code onto this or go back and re-figure out how it works at any point without struggling to read through it and find out what we're looking at. And because we updated our mouse data to a static class, we can also change a whole bunch of other things to just make it much easier to look at and see what's going on. So to go ahead and get started with doing the updates that we need to do to make our code better for the current project is, if you don't already, go into your project and open the user interface script, and the onDragIn function is the function that we're going to look at to create the main changes that we'll be doing to the project. And if you look inside of this function, the first thing that really needs to be changed is all of these vars that we created, just making this easier to read, which that in turn should have told us that we had a problem and we should have gone back and changed some stuff. But how we're going to fix this is going into our mouse item class, and instead of just being a normal class, we're going to make it a static class. And now making a static class means that we can just call mouse item dot to get any of these variables, and every time we call it from our static mouse item class, the variable is going to be the same no matter what script we call it from. So we can store a variable on one script, then call the mouse item class from another script and retrieve the same variable that was stored on the other script without either script having to know each other. And since we made this a static class, that means we also need to make all of these variables static. That'll get rid of the current error that we have. We're also going to change the name from mouse item to mouse data because that's a little more representative of what it is, since it's holding data on our mouse and it's not just an item on our mouse. So now that we've changed our mouse data class to be a static class, let's go back up to our onDragIn. We'll leave these in for now in case we need to look at it, but we're going to go ahead and start changing all the things that need to be changed. Let's move the function call that destroys our temp item to here. And now this can be the first name that we change. We'll change it to say mouse data dot. And you'll notice when we type dot, we still have our old names, and these names work, but you kind of have to assume what they're doing, and they're not really representative very well of what they're doing. So let's go back down to the mouse data class and think of some better names for representing what they're doing. So the user interface UI is really the interface our mouse is over. So let's just call it interface mouse is over. And then game object obj is the temp item that we're dragging, so we'll just call it temp item being dragged. That way we won't ever confuse it with an item on one of our inventories. Because it's not necessarily an item, it's the object that we created that's just temporarily following our mouse to represent that an item is being dragged. Now we're actually going to get rid of both these inventory slot variables because we can make our code in a way to where we don't have to store those. So for this last game object that was called hover object, we're going to change it to say slot hovered over. And I think these names are much more representative of what they're doing. So now that we've changed the names, let's go back up to here and we'll say mouse data.temp item being dragged. I'm just going to go ahead and erase this entire if function and we're going to rewrite it. That'll make it easier. And we can go ahead and get rid of all these variables too. Go ahead and get rid of this debug and get rid of this. So the only thing that we have left is destroy mouse data.temp item being dragged. So when we finish dragging an item, we're just going to destroy our temp item. That's all we're doing right now. But let's walk through what we're actually going to be needing to do when we finish dragging. So as we already have it, we need to destroy the temp item being dragged first. Then we need to check, is our mouse over an interface? If our mouse is not over an interface, that means we can just go ahead and destroy whatever item that we're dragging, or open an interface that says, do you want to destroy this item? Or maybe, do you want to drop this item on the ground? But at the current state of our inventory, we're just going to make it destroy the item instantly if you drop it off of any of your interfaces. So we'll check if our mouse is over an interface. If it's not, we'll destroy the item. The next thing that needs to be done in this function is check is our mouse over a slot, meaning is there a place where we can drop this item off at to move the item? If our mouse is over the slot, then we'll drop it. And when the item gets dropped into the slot, we'll call a swap items function, which is going to check if the item you're dragging can go into that slot. And then it's going to check, is there an item already in that slot? And if there is, we need to make sure that that item can go in the slot that the item we were dragging originally came from. And that sounds complicated, but a lot of that's going to be inside of the swap items function, so we won't ever really have to look at that code when using that function. And that'll actually be the end of the function. It's just 2 if calls and 2 quick functions inside of those if calls instead of that giant nested chunks of ifs. So we'll say if mouse data dot interface mouse is over is equal to null. That means we are not over an interface currently, which means let's destroy the item. And currently we call the items by saying items displayed. I think that's a pretty bad name, so let's go ahead and rename that. We can right click and go to definition, and it'll take us instantly to where that is called at. So this is actually the empty or full slots on our interface. So we're going to call it, instead of items displayed, it is displaying items, but technically it's displaying the slots for our items to go in. So we're going to call it slots on interface. Then if we hover over it, we can hit show potential fixes and click rename items displayed to slots on interface. That'll go through our project and go ahead and change all of the variable calls that we have to the new name. So now that we've renamed it, we're going to say slots on interface obj. And obj is the object that we started dragging. So it's the original object that's being dragged. And we'll say dot remove items, which we don't have this function yet, so let's create it. Or remove item, because we're removing a single item. So we're going to create our remove item function inside of our inventory slot class. So we can right click on our slots on inventory, or slots on inventory, go to definition, right click on inventory slots, go to definition. Then let's scroll to below update slots and we'll say public void remove items, or remove item, because we're just removing a single item. Then we'll say item equals new item, then amount equals 0. Now we can save that and we'll go back to our user interface script. Scroll down to where we are working at, and we have our remove item function now. Then after we remove the item, we want to return, because we don't want to fire any more code in this function if we are removing the item. Because if we're removing the item, we don't need to swap the item, and that's the main purpose of this function, is to swap or move an item. Now after we check if it needs to be destroyed or not, we'll say if mouse data dot slot hovered over. So if there is a slot that we're hovering over currently, we want to check if we can swap that item. First, let's make a variable just to make the function a little easier to read. So we'll say inventory slot, mouse hovered slot data. So this is the slot data of our slot hover object. And to get the slot data of the object that we're currently hovering over, we'll say mouse data dot interface mouse is over, because we need to get the item database that is linked to the interface that we're currently using, which is probably all the same database. Maybe we'll think of a way to make it easier to get a singular database later on. But for now on, we'll just do it this way. Mouse data dot interface mouse is over. This also makes it a little more varied, I guess. Honestly, it would make it confusing if you had 2 lists of database and they had both the same IDs in both database. That would just make things pretty confusing. So we probably will make a single database later on, which we are using a single database, but I mean a single database link, so there's no user error. But anyways, to continue, we'll say dot slots on interface, which is a dictionary that links our game object with our inventory slot. So we just need to pass in the game object to get the data. And the game object is mouse data dot slot hovered over. Now that we have the data of the slot that we're hovering over, we can just say inventory dot swap items, which currently it's called move items. So let's go into this function, change it up a bit, and rename it to swap items, because that makes a lot more sense than move item. So first, let's change it to swap item with an S on the end, because we're swapping one item with another item, so it's 2 items. So swap item sounds better in my opinion. And it's pretty much going to be exactly the same. We're just going to add a one if function right here. It's going to say if item 2 dot can place in slot, and we need to make a couple changes in this can place in slot function, so we can go ahead and do that now since we're using it. So right click and go to definition. And this return right here, we need to make a few more calls just to check for errors. So we need to check if the item object exists. We'll rename this to item object because we're using an item object and not an item. So it's just easier to read and you won't get confused thinking that it's the actual item class. It's an item object class. So we'll call it item object. And we're going to check and see if it's equal to null, meaning there's not an item in the slot that we're trying to place it in. So we're just going to return true because if there's not an item in the slot, any item can be placed in it. We're going to say itemObject.data, but you'll see if you try to call that, it doesn't exist. So let's go into our itemObject class. And we're going to make a change here that I might end up changing again, but at the current stage of this video, I think the system works cleaner doing it the way I'm about to do it. But I'm just letting you know that this may change again. You'll see that we're storing our item ID on our item object, on our item, and we're even storing it on our inventory slot. So we have 3 places where we're storing an ID, and that's pretty confusing to be honest. So let's change that to only holding an ID on the item so that it'll be much more easier and make more sense in our heads. So let's actually change the inventory slots item ID first. So we can just go ahead and delete that variable completely and save. Now that we deleted that, we're going to get a bunch of errors. So let's go through and fix the errors. We don't need to set the IDs in any of these anymore because we don't have an ID to set. We can go ahead and rename this item to say item object. And let's get rid of this so we don't have this error to deal with for now because we're dealing with the inventory slots ID error currently. Let's go back into Unity and find more errors that we have. Line this out so it's not getting in the way of our errors. Line this out because we're no longer calling the mouse data from our player class, we're calling it from a static class. And the same on our display inventory. So now we have a bunch of errors we need to fix. If we go into inventory slot, it's calling the container.items.id, but we can just say items.item.id. So let's just copy item.id and replace it in all the places that need to be fixed. Let's just line all of this out to get these errors out of the way for now. Go back into Unity and find our next error. Double click on it. Replace ID with item.id. And we're going to keep doing this until we get rid of all the errors or until we find an error that's different than what we're currently doing. So slot.value.id, value is an inventory slot, so it's the same fix. We need to fix these errors, but it's not the errors we're currently fixing, so let's ignore them. We can fix this ID right here. Fix this ID right here. And that should be all the ID areas we need to fix, I believe. Let's save and check real quick. So this is mouse item, more mouse item errors. Mouse item, mouse item, mouse item. Mouse, 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 mouse. All right, here's some more IDs. Now that we compiled again, look for more ID errors. We could have probably fixed the mouse item errors first to make this easier to find, but oh well. That should be all the areas where we needed to fix that. So let's do the mouse item now. We'll finish fixing that actually before we finish the item, just so we can get rid of these errors. So let's go back into our user interface, and instead of player.mouseItem.hoverObject, it's going to be mouseData.slotHoveredOver, then hoverItem, and then we can just get rid of this if function completely. And then on exit, we just need to make it say mouseData.slotHoveredOver is equal to null. On inner interface is going to say, instead of player.mouseItem, mouseData.interface mouse is over. And this end part's the same because we're just changing the names of the variables. And then on exit interface, it's just mouseData.interface mouse is over is equal to null. Then on drag start, we'll fix a bunch of this later. For now, let's just fix the mouse item problem. So let's get rid of the slots on interface one, and we're just going to say player.mouseItem.object. We'll change this to mouseData.tempItem being dragged is equal to mouseObject. And if you look, mouseObject is the new game object that we created and added all these components to. So now in onDrag, we'll say if mouseData.tempItem being dragged is not equal to null. If it is not equal to null, we'll move it. So all those errors should be fixed. Let's go back into Unity and compile. Let's double click on here, fix the rest of our errors. Display inventory is not a class we're using anymore, so we can just actually delete this class altogether instead of fixing the errors in it. So delete your display inventory class. Let Unity recompile, find your next errors. There's no more errors. We should have them all fixed now. So we haven't changed anything about how the game works. The only main thing we changed in some variable names, but we did make functionality differences by changing the inventory slot's ID to no longer store an ID. So let's play the game and just make sure everything works still. You'll see our inventory is completely loaded with fish. Let's go look at our inventory and see why. Must have had everything on 0 for some reason, but it's all -1 now, so it's no longer loading in fish. There could be an error that I'm overlooking, but I think it's fine. That could have just been some strange serialization thing. Alright, so let's pick some things up and make sure it works. If anyone gets an error that they can't get past right here, just let me know in the comments and I'll help you out. So we were able to pick up items. We can't swap items, but that's because we lined out the code for swapping items, but we're not getting an error, so that's good. So let's fix the swap items function since we made that not work anymore. So we were working on the can, place, and slot function, so we need to finish doing that. So we're back to saying _itemObject.data, which doesn't exist, so we need to finish the changes that we were doing on the item object. So we're back to doing the ID thing we were doing a minute ago. We don't have any errors, so this is going to be a lot easier to work with now. So we don't want to store the ID on the item object anymore. We're going to store an item on our item object, so that way we can create our item on the item object in the editor and then just push that item to all the things that we need to push it to. So we have our ID here. Let's just set it to -1 by default. And then on here, let's get rid of the ID that was stored on the item object. We can get rid of the item buff variable. And then we're going to make a new variable and call it public item. And we're going to call this data equals new item. So let's go back into our inventory object and we're going to just finish writing what we were writing before. And then we'll fix all the errors that we got for making the change that we just changed. And by that, I mean by getting rid of the ID on the item object. So now the ID on your item object is called through the data, which is the ID on the item. So we're going to say data.id is less than 0. And if the ID is less than 0, that means that the slot is empty, so we can place an item in it. So I also said that this means the slot's empty, but really this is saying that the ID was -1, so when it checked the item object database, it was unable to find an item, so it returns null, which gives an error. So it's just better to put that there to keep it from giving you an error. There's probably a little bit of code we could put somewhere else to fix that error, but this is the easiest way to do it for now. So now that we have can, place, and slot fixed, we can go back to the swap items function. And we'll say can, place, and slot item1.itemObject. And you'll see that doesn't exist. You only have an item call, which isn't what we want because public item is returning the item on the slot, and we want the item object. But you'll see the item object variable doesn't exist. So let's go onto our inventory slot and create a function that can return the item object. So how we're going to do this is we're going to say public item object, then we'll make an open and a close bracket, and we'll say get and then we'll make another open and close bracket. And what this does is we're basically making this item object a variable reference that has a public get and a unaccessible set. So we can always get the item object, but we can never set the item object. If we wanted to set the item object, then we can add another function called set, but we're just trying to get right now. We don't need to set it because we'll never need to set it. We're just returning an item object based off the ID in the database. So we'll say return, or first we'll say if item.id is greater than or equal to 0, meaning it's the ID exists and there is going to be that ID in the database because the database starts at 0 and goes up, we'll return parent.inventory.database.getItem item.id. And if the item ID is -1 or below, we'll return null because that item doesn't exist in the database. Now if we right click on get item, we can say find all references, and now we have every place that the get item is called. So we can actually go to this place and replace it with item object if we can. We can't replace it here because our item object class is using this function. So it'd be a little hard to replace it. We're not going to replace this one. This one's fine. So if we go here, we're doing inventory.database.getItem. But if we look here, all we need is a link to an inventory slot. So all we need is an inventory slot, and we can find the item object based off that inventory slot. Apparently we have a naming violation. It's supposed to be a capital I when you do this, I guess. So we'll go ahead and fix that. And then we haven't used this anywhere, but we'll just rename it just in case. So go back here, look for your link to an inventory slot. So slot.value is your inventory slot link. So we can just say slot.value.itemObject.UI display. And that is much easier than this long, confusing line of code. So let's find the next place that's using getItem. Can't change it here, but we can change it here. So slots on interface obj is our inventory slot. So we can just copy this, line this out, do slots on interface obj.itemObject.UI display. We can erase this, save that. That should be all the places where we need to make that change. But now that we've created that function, we can go back to what we were doing before. And while we're here, let's just go ahead and get rid of this because we don't need to do that anymore. All we're doing now is setting up this dictionary on and after deserialization, which isn't even necessary. You could get away with not doing it. It just makes our code in other places easier. So why not? Okay, so where were we? We were still working on the swap items function inside of our inventory object, I believe. So now we can say item1.itemObject. You can place item1.itemObject into the slot and item1.canPlaceInSlot item2.itemObject. We need 2 parentheses on the end. We'll make an open bracket and a closed bracket. We can re-put this code inside of here and unline it. And now you can see we have these errors, and if we go into our inventory slot function that we're getting the error on, you'll see that we no longer need to store these IDs. So we can actually get rid of these. Save and go back. Let's get rid of this, this, and this. So we don't need to push the ID in our update slot function anymore. So let's save. Scroll down a bit because you can see right here we have some errors. Remove these IDs that's still being called on our update slot. Find the one other error that we have, which is also pushing in an ID on update slot. So we'll save all that, go back into Unity, let it compile, and find whatever other errors we may still have. So inside of here, it's not item.id anymore, it's item.data.id, and it's item.data.buffs because we removed the buffs off the item object and we only need a reference to the item buffs on the data that's stored on it. So we'll say item.data.buffs. All right, so we can save that, go back into Unity and check for more errors. We don't have any errors. So our swap item function should be working again. We can try to play the game and see if it is. We're actually going to get an error now I remember. If we go to our inventory, look at our player inventory, this should all be fine still, but if we look at our item database, or our items themselves, we changed the data so it's no longer storing the IDs the same. So we need to just serialize our database to rechange all the IDs. But first we need to go into here. I don't know why I deleted the ID earlier. We needed to update this. So inside of your items database object, we're going to say items.data.id, or items I mean, because we need the current item that we're looping through in the loop.id is equal to I. So that way we'll set the ID of our database items when they get added to the database. So we let it compile and it should auto set all our IDs. And it seemed to set some, but not all of them. That's strange. Let's just erase our database and replace the items in it. So we can just hover, select everything, unselect the database. Or first we need to lock our inventory on the database. Select everything, unselect the database, and drag and drop it in. Then let's check our bone data, or our bone item ID. ID is 0. Boots ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cool, that fixed it. Now you can see all our buffs got reset also. I think this is a good time to change the way items get stacked. Actually, let's just test the game. Everything should be stacking right now with how the code works. Because currently our code checks if it has no buffs on it, then it can stack. So everything's stacking. We can't swap items still. There must be another place where we forgot to unline some code or something. So let's add the stackable variable in and fix the reason why we can't swap items. So let's go to our item object. First thing we're going to do is add the stackable variable. So underneath UI display, we're just going to say public bool stackable. Now let's go to our inventory object and find the add items function. And let's change this function up a little bit. Right now our add item function's pretty ugly, so we're just going to actually delete everything inside of it and we're going to rewrite it. So let's work our way through what we need to do. First we need to check, is there an available slot to put an item in? So the easiest way to do that is to get the empty slot count. So let's make a function to retrieve the amount of empty slots we have inside of our inventory. So we'll say public int empty slot count, open bracket, close bracket, and we'll say get open close bracket, int counter equals 0. The counter is what's going to store how many empty slots we have. Now we need to loop through our inventory by saying for int I equals 0, I is less than container.items.length. Then inside of here, we're going to say if container.itemsi.item.id is less than or equal to -1, meaning that inventory slot is empty, we're going to say counter plus plus. Then after we loop through all of the items in the inventory, we just return counter. Excellent. Now we can use empty slot count inside of add items, and we'll just say if empty slot count is less than or equal to 0, return false. And we're going to change void to say bool. So if our empty slot count is less than or equal to 0, there's no items left in our inventory, so we should return false because we can't add an item. And now we'll say inventory slot is equal to find item on inventory. And you'll see this function doesn't exist, so we need to create it. And as the name of the function, it's looking for an item on the inventory to see if the item exists or not. So we'll say public inventory slot find item on inventory. And we're going to pass an item into this function. Now we need to loop through our inventory, container.items.length, if container.itemsi.item.id is equal to underscore item.id, meaning the item in our inventory is equal to the same item that we're passing into the function, we want to return that item. So we'll say return container.items.item, or just container.itemsi. Now, if we were never able to find a matching item ID, we'll just return null because there's not an item on the inventory. Then back in our add item function, we can say if !database.getItem, we'll pass in the ID, so underscore item.id, .stackable, the function that we just created. So if it is not stackable, which we did by putting the explanation at the front, that means if it is not true, or if the slot is equal to null, meaning we were not able to find this item in our inventory. So if it's not stackable or we did not find the item, we want to set an empty slot. So we'll say set empty slot underscore item underscore amount. Then we want to return true because we were able to add an item to the inventory. Now if we make it through all of this, That means we did find a stackable item and the slot is not null, so we'll say slot.addAmount underscore amount. And we want to return true because we were able to add the item. So now we have our add item function completely redone. We still need to figure out why swap item's not working. So let's go back into our user interface, and onDragIn isn't finished yet. That's why. So let's go to user interface, onDragIn, mouse data.slot hovered over. We are doing inventory.swap item, slots on interface, obj, and then mouse hover slot data. So we're pushing the slot on interface obj, which is the object we started dragging. We're looking inside of the dictionary of links for this item that we started dragging, and then we do the mouse hover slot data, what we set on the line above it, and we try to swap these two items. And that's it. Our onDragIn function is complete. That is way easier to read. So we kind of went through that in a not great order. It was sort of okay, sort of not okay. If anybody got confused about things that we did there, just let me know in the comments below. And I think we're at an okay point to discuss this. I'm sure some of you noticed it takes me a really long time to get videos out. Maybe lately I've been doing one video a month. I really don't enjoy doing that, and I wish I could get more videos out, but I'm sure you've noticed there's no ads in these videos as of the recording of this one. So it's not like I'm getting money or any type of motivation to make these videos besides the pure entertainment value I get out of doing it. And the most of that entertainment value is the interaction with the people who watch the videos after I upload it. Making it can be pretty painful, but I love reading the comments and replying to people and seeing people actually use my system. So with that being said, if you like and share the video and subscribe to my channel, that will definitely help me get more videos out. Not only will it help me get monetized, meaning I'll start actually making money for the work I'm doing, which not much money because YouTube advertisement on a small channel is pretty bad, but it's still, it's more motivation, and whatever motivation that I can get to make videos faster is better for everybody. But anyways, now that we have the onDragIn function complete, let's just scroll through here and make sure we have everything else working. Looks like it. That was a pretty quick glance. Not 100% sure if it is. Let's just click play and see if it works. We didn't set stackable on anything, so let's just go ahead and do that really quick. The only things that should be stackable is bones and monkfish. So our fish are stacking. Our swords are not stacking. Excellent. Let's pick up a few more items and see if the item swapping is working. Cool. Now the question is item equipping still working? Nope. And I think the reason for is we might not have, it might have reset our allowed items. Let's check and see. No, our allowed items is still set. Is our item type reset? Yeah, everything's a chest. Oh, and now we got an error. Cool. Let's fix what types of items they're supposed to be. So all our swords are supposed to be swords. Or weapons. Our shield is a shield. Our helmet's a helmet. Chest is a chest. Boots are boots. That should be everything. Let's save real quick, clear our console out, click play. Picked up some items. We can drag it. It let us equip it. Can't put it in the chest or those slots. We can still swap it. Let's pick up some other types. Try to equip a full equipment slot of items. Shield still goes here. That works. Can't drop a sword over a shield to get it in our main hand. Cool. Chest, helmet, and boots are working. And I'm not seeing any errors so far. Just going to try to see if I can get it to give me an error of some sort. Item deleting still working. Can't seem to get it to give me an error, which is a good thing. If somebody else finds an error or manages to get it to give you an error, let me know. We'll take a look at it. Alright, everything seems to be working. So that's the main code changes we're going to be doing. Now we're just going to go through all of the files and just look at things that we think might need updating. So let's just start with the file farthest to the left, the item database object. It looks reasonably okay. It's a short file and we hardly use it. I think it'll be okay. Let's check item object. Now let's check inventory object. I didn't see anything on here that looks like it needs to be changed, at least for now. We're looking for like major things that are just like blaringly obviously need to be fixed. So inside of clear, we can actually call items.removeItem instead, because that makes more sense inside of a clear function. Inside of inventory slot, instead of item equals null, we're going to say item equals new item. All right, that's everything I think we need to change in inventory object. So inside of here, we can make some changes too. In our onTrigger inner, let's make it only pick up and destroy the item if we have an available slot in our inventory. So we're just going to say if inventory.addItem, which if you remember, we already pretty much typed all the code for it. We just need to check if addItem's returning true or false. So we'll say the same thing we were doing, new item, item.item, and we want to add one of them. But now the only difference is we're only going to destroy it if it adds it. And we can call this right here, since we already have this typed instead. Then we can get rid of this inventory.addItem because it's doing it inside of the if statement. And we can also save our equipments right here. If you just copy and paste this and call it equipment, then we'll just say equipment.save and inventory or equipment.load. That way we can save and load our equipments also. That also means we need to clear it out too, so we can just say equipment.container.items.clear instead of new inventory. Oops, it's container.clear, not container.items.clear. So also get rid of a bunch of the like serialization problems that we've been having when we enter and leave play mode. So we don't need a link to our player inside the user interface anymore. So inside of onDragStart, it's doing a bunch of, it looks confusing to be honest. And the reason why is because we're creating a game object inside of it. So let's actually create a function to make that game object and return the created game object instead. It'll just look a lot cleaner and be more obvious what's going on. So we'll say public game object, create temp item. Let's pass in a game object. The game object that we're passing in is the object that's being dragged. And we can just copy and paste this straight into here. And we'll just say game object temp item is equal to null. Then we'll say if slots on interface obj.item.id is greater than or equal to 0. This is saying if this object does exist on our inventory, we're trying to drag an item that exists, then we're going to want to do all of this. And what we're going to be doing is we'll say temp item is equal to the new game object, then change the mouse object.transform to temp item.transform, then mouse object.add component to temp item.add component, and same with the add component for the rect transform. Now after we do all of that, we'll return the temp item. Then inside of onDragStart, we can get rid of everything inside of here except for mouseData.tempItem being dragged is equal to create temp item. Then we just pass in the object. Much better. Now this is like complete code sugar and not necessary, but we're going to make an extension method for this dictionary so we can technically make a class to hold code for this dictionary alone. What an extension method is if you type slots on interface dot, you get all these functions that you can call. Well, we're going to make our own function to call, and that's what an extension method is, because we're extending the methods that can be called off of it. The way we're going to do that is just scroll to the very bottom. This isn't the cleanest way to do it, but this is really optional, and you only have to do this if you want to. I wouldn't even say it's the best way to do it, but it does make our code cleaner, so we're going to do it until we find a reason not to do it. So public static class extension methods, making a class to hold your extension method and calling it extension methods is just, it's meta, it's what everybody does. You don't have to do it though. Then inside of here, we're going to say public static void, because all extension methods need to be static. And we're going to call it update slot display. And now to make this update slot display to appear on the end of our dictionary, what we need to do is take exactly what the dictionary is, which is a dictionary game object inventory slot, go down to our extension method, and we're going to say this, and then we're going to paste that dictionary key value pair in, and we're going to name it. We'll name it slots on interface. So now if we save, scroll back up, and type slots on interface dot, we should get the function update slot display. Beautiful. So let's create what the update slot display is going to do. And what it's going to do is exactly this function pretty much. So we can just copy this and paste it inside of our extension method. And the only thing you should have to change is adding the underscore to the beginning of slots on interface, and everything else should pretty much just work. Now we can get rid of this update slot function that we had. And inside of update, instead of calling update slots, we can say slots on interface dot update slot display. That's a lot cleaner, completely optional. Don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I think it's cleaner. Let's go back into our game, compile and play just to make sure we have no errors and everything is still working. It's just good to make sure any of the small changes you make don't break your game. So just mass swap some items, see if we get an error. Alright, these loaded our equipment screen as soon as the game started. Let's see if we can take them off without breaking the game. Works just fine. We can put them back on. Hard to see if it's actually swapping, but I'm going to assume it is. Cool, we don't have any errors it seems like. Okay. Oh, we never set our equipment on our player, so yeah, we would get an error there, wouldn't we? Go to your player and set the equipment on the variable that we just created for your equipment. And now let's continue looking through our code to see if there's any other changes we need to make. So one thing I forgot to do in the last video that broke the saving and loading that a couple people asked about, and I replied to them in the comments to let them know how to fix it. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do it in the video too, because I shouldn't have left y'all with that error. That was rude. But I just completely forgot. But I guess I also purposely left you with another error too that we hopefully fixed in this video. If anybody gets an error with equipping and de-equipping items still, let me know. I'm just trying to find the spot where we need to make this change for the saving and loading. I completely forgot where it's at. Oh yeah, it's the parent that needs fixing. So on the public user interface parent, we just need to add 2 brackets, and inside of it, let's type system.non-serializable. This will keep this variable from showing up in the editor, and it will also prevent your save system from trying to save this variable, which it can't be saved because if we go into it, you'll see that we have a link to a scriptable object, and a scriptable object it can't be saved. It's the same as a game object. You can't save a game object either because Unity can't find a link to it when you go to load it. So if I tried to just save out this plane, just throw it in a save function and save the plane and then go to try to load this plane in, where is Unity going to look to find it? We need to have it stored somewhere to give a reference to where this plane is at. So it's the same for scriptable objects. You need a reference for where those scriptable objects are at, which is our database. So yeah, that's why we're doing system.non-serializable on the parent, because the parent has an inventory object on it. That's the only reason. Otherwise, you'd be able to save this because it's a base class. Let me just go through and see if there's any other changes that need to be made. I'd really hate to leave y'all with another error for a month. Hopefully it won't take another month for the next video to come out, though. That's not what I was meaning by that. I got a new microphone. I bought myself one to try to motivate myself to make more videos. So hopefully that'll help. I believe if we try to build it, we're going to get an error. I think I remember finding when I was doing the testing. So let's try to build. Yep, we got an error. And the reason why is because of this. So we only need to set this in the editor. This is just code to make setting our sprite on our object inside of the world easier when we're creating the world through the editor. So let's simply just we'll say pound if unity underscore editor and then pound end if. I'll just make this only work if we're in the editor, so it won't run if we're inside the game. Simple as that. Let's try to build again and make sure we don't get an error and we're actually able to build the game, and I'm not leaving y'all with a system that can't even be built out. You can see it's building. We'll just go ahead and let it finish building and see if everything works while the game's actually built. Filled our inventory with bones. That's kind of an issue. Let's go back into the game. Our ID got reset back to 0. That's why. So even if we click play here, we're going to have bones, aren't we? Yep. Okay. Not sure what we did that forced that back to resetting to 0. Because if we enter and leave play now, it's fine. Let's just build again. Yay, we don't have bones in our inventory. We're able to pick up items. Stacking and non-stacking is working. Can we equip items? No, we can't. Something tells me something reset on our items. I don't know what's going on that's resetting our stuff, but yeah, it reset again. Yo, I know what it is. Yeah, we need to get rid of all of these. We just need to use item object and nothing else. Which is going to be a pain because we have to recreate all our items. So delete all these scripts. But this is 100% what's wrong. Which you didn't actually have to delete those scripts. I just thought of another way to do it. But it's too late now. So make this not abstract anymore, and we're going to save it out. Go back into Unity. Now if we go to our items, all of them are broken. We might, if we get lucky, let's see if this will work. Usually it doesn't work. This gives such strange serialization problems, but let's try it. Let's just replace the script with the item object script. Nope, didn't work. Okay, so we had to remake all our items. Bones, boots, chest, helmet, monk, shield, sword, sword, sword. Delete. Goodbye. Gotta make new ones. Create. Item. Just go through, create all your new items. we forgot to add since we made this, the item object is no longer abstract, we need to do the create asset menu right here. Let's clear out our database so we stop getting that serialization problem. Create inventory system. Oh, it's inventory system / items. Alright, we'll just start with bones, stackable, default, create, item, monkfish. So this should be the only time we have to do this. We should never have to do it again now that we debugged the problem, fixed it, and solved the issue. We'll add the sprites in after we create all the items. Well, I guess we can just do it now. It makes sense to do it now. Let's go ahead and set the sprite for our bone, set the sprite for our fish. Probably fast forward through this part. You don't really have to watch me. I'm sure you know how to make items. Alright, now we have all our items recreated. Let's add them back to our database. So lock your database interface. Select all your items. Make sure you don't have your database selected also. Drag and drop them in. Make sure your IDs are set. ID 0, ID 1, 2, 3, It's cool. IDs are set. Now we need to go to the items in the world and reset them. Because if you look at them, all of them have item object, none. So let's just set them all. First I'll set them all to bones. And then we'll go through and change some. We'll make these first 3 monkfish, make this a sword. I don't have to tell you. You'll see it when I'm done. Alright, we have all our items in the world reset. We have our database reset. Let's click play and see what happens. Oh, cool. Started off with a key not found exception. Beautiful. Wonder why. Inventory object, line 157. It was trying to return an object. The ID was greater than 0, but apparently it was not in the database. Let's take a wild guess and say, I don't know actually. Let's click play again. We're not getting any errors now. Could have just been another Unity serialization problem. It's the only issue with this. It's really frustrating. Just a random issue, a random bug that comes and disappears, and I'll probably never see it again. Alright, well, whatever. Everything's working. We can swap items. We can equip them. Can't equip in the wrong slots. We can swap equipped items from the inventory and your equipment screen. Cool. Everything's working on this page. Let's just build the game again and see if everything breaks or not. Build and run. Swear if my inventory is full of bones again. Might be the end of this video. Just kidding. Maybe. I'm raging. Okay, our inventory IDs got set to 0 again, but our items did not get reset. So we just need to figure out why our inventory ID is being set to 0 when the game opens. Alright, let's think about this. I'm just going to build it again and see if it works. Because I don't even know. I really don't. It wasn't doing this before. I might just have to end this video here and figure it out later because I really don't know what the problem is. For reference, the videos when they get edited down are usually like 40 minutes, but at the moment I'm in 2 hours and something odd minutes into recording this, so yeah. Alright, we didn't get bones in the inventory. That's a plus at least. We're able to pick up items. Let's equip items. Most frustrating thing about this is if I would have just got this error before I started recording, I would have just fixed the error and had this. You probably wouldn't have even noticed this happen because I would have prevented it from happening before it happened. But oh well, live and you learn. Everything seems to be working. Let's try to save. Let's close out of this. Now let's reopen the build. Easiest way to get to your build file is just right click, show and explore, then go back to where your build file is. Alright, click the load button. Cool. The saving and loading is working inside of the build. We didn't start with bones in our inventory. That's good. I'm sick of starting with bones in my inventory. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like and a subscribe. So I figured out the reason it was loading bones into our inventory was a serialization problem. I'm not 100% sure if this is accurate, but I believe that Unity was saving a version of this item that had 0 in the ID slot. So the way that I fixed it is by changing the allowed item size to just 1, and then I saved my project out, and then I closed out of Unity. If you remember before, I can't remember if I showed it or not because it's been a few days, but if you closed out of Unity and reopened it, it would reopen and your inventory would automatically have all zeros in the ID slot instead of -1 like it was when you saved. So I feel like it might have been Unity thinking that the inventory was the same, so it didn't need to save it, so it wasn't overriding the 0 with a -1. But by changing allowed items, we forced it to realize that it needed to be saved, so we can just change it back to 0 now and resave our project and close out of it. And now when we open it, it should work fine. We should be able to build it and everything and not have any issues. We'll do one build real quick just to make sure. Alright, our inventory is empty. Let's pick some stuff up. Oh, something apparently broke. Great. I decided to start recording to fix an issue. And now we have more issues. And it also seems laggy, doesn't it? Everything worked fine there, so let's get rid of these debugs. Maybe that's what's making it lag. Alright, so I figured out the reason it was not being able to find the items in the dictionary was another Unity issue, really. It's nothing that our coding logic was wrong with. It's just something with integrating with Unity that's messing it up. So the way we're going to fix it is, I already made the change in the project, so I'm just going to Control Z it out and then we'll fix it again. So this get item is a dictionary. It's inside of the item database object. And we're just going to get rid of it and just directly use this array that we created, because for some reason, if you notice, when we tried to pick up items, it wasn't serializing the item into the dictionary correctly. So we're going to get rid of this get item completely, and then we're going to fix all the errors that we get. We have 4 errors. There's only 4 errors. So we're going to line this out. That gets rid of 2 of our errors. Then we just have 2 more errors, which is right here. Replace get item to just say items, and it's still going to be using the same item ID. Really, having this dictionary was completely pointless, and we might as well just go around it anyways. It should make the code faster and less memory usage also. So now that we made those saves or changes, we can save and go back into Unity and let it all compile. And then we can build and run the game. Let's try to pick up some items. Alright, well, it was literally working right before I clicked record, and now we're getting the same error, but it's pointing to the array instead. So I've been having a lot of problems with getting this to work, as you can see in these previous clips that I've shown you, and I've had to stop recording twice now, and I believe this is the second or third time I've recorded something. I'm not sure how many of the clips I'm going to use because it's been frustrating. A lot of the errors that I'm showing how to fix, I have a strange feeling not a lot of people are going to get them. I think it's a strange error with when we deleted the, when our item object was abstracted into multiple objects. I think when we deleted it and recreated the objects, it made some weird serialization problem in Unity. Because I noticed one of the problems I was having, I don't even know if I got this on camera, to be honest. If I did, I'll show a clip of it. Maybe I'll show a reclip of it here so you know what I'm talking about. But I noticed it was only messed up on some objects, and I didn't really pay enough attention at the time to tell, but it might have been only the objects that were the abstracted classes, and maybe default objects were the only ones working. Not too sure. Now that I think about it, I don't think so, because bones are defaults, or fish are defaults, and I know fish haven't been working. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the problem is, but I'm pretty sure I got it working. But sadly, I've already done all of the changes in this project because my other project, my tester project that I work on before recording the videos, isn't having any of the errors that I've been having. It just works fine. I can build it, run it, everything just works perfect in it. So that's why I don't know if other people are going to have this error. And I know for a fact it's not actually a coding error because I literally went through line for line with my other project, and there's not a single line that's different in the functionality of this code. So I really think it's a Unity error, but I can't be 100% sure on that. But either way, I got it working, and I'm going to show you what I did. I might even have forgotten some things that I did do. I'm not 100%. So in the item database object, we took what was in our onAfter deserialize and put it in its own void called public void update ID. And it's doing the same thing. The only difference is we have this if check right here that says if items.data ID is not equal to I, which I is the ID that it should be, then we're going to set it to I. So that way it's not just constantly resetting it, which most likely isn't the problem, but it's nice to have that, I guess, either way. Then we put a context menu here so I can manually update the IDs because I thought I was probably going to just have to have it manually instead of doing it during the serialization, because that's the main problem is something was happening during serialization where it was thinking the items that I was trying to pick up's IDs were -1, even though at the beginning of the project it was setting all the item IDs correctly. I confirmed all this multiple times, just somewhere in between it's setting the IDs and retrieving the IDs. It just wasn't working correctly, and I have no idea why. But for some reason, I ran it like this with just this in, and the serialization completely lined out, so I ran it like this a couple times, and it was working just fine with me like manually updating the IDs using the context menu, meaning I was doing this, updating IDs with this right here. And I was like, well, okay, it's working, so I guess let's unline this and just test it and see if it works still. So I unlined this and just ran this void through onAfter deserialize, and then I built it out again, and it's been working fine. I've built it out at least 10 times now to make sure it's not going to mess up when I go to record, because all the errors seem to keep appearing when I start recording and aren't happening before I record. Or else I would have fixed them, and this video would have been a lot shorter and a lot easier. But yeah, so I updated this. I believe this is the main thing I updated. Let me just check and make sure. And also, if you noticed, inside of this class, it used to have the public items get item. Let's see if I can Control Z back to where it was in here. So yeah, it had the dictionary get item, but I actually just went ahead and got rid of the get item completely, and we're just using the items array directly. And after making those changes, it should hopefully work if you're having the same serialization problem I was having where certain items weren't picking up. And if you do pick up items and it's giving you the wrong items, just go through here and see if your IDs match the element number that it's in. If they don't, you can either use the update IDs function that we added in, or you can just set this to 0 and then redrag all the items in to repopulate your IDs. Either one will work fine. But I also, just to make sure, I added another weapon in just to make sure everything was going to work. I'll add another one live and not live, but during the recording, and hopefully it's not going to break and everything's going to work fine. So we'll add an Helm 3 in. Let's give it a picture or a sprite. Don't think we're using this one, so we'll use this one. Let's just take a look. No, we're not. All right, we'll use this helmet. It's called Helm 3. It's a helmet. It doesn't have an ID, but when we put it in the database, it should auto give it its ID. Go back to Helm 3. Its ID is set as 14. Let's put a Helm 3 into the world. Let's just make sure it works inside the game. Cool, we were able to pick it up. We're able to equip it. Can we switch it with another helmet? And it's switchable with another helmet. Let's try to save our inventory. We'll save one of a couple items on our character. We're just making sure everything's working. I want to make sure everything works by the end of this video. I don't want to leave it with any bugs. So we picked up some items, but I'm going to load my inventory so it should overwrite the items that I already picked up. And it did. That's the same items we had when we loaded or saved. Now we can pick up more items and it works just fine. Now let's try to build the game and make sure everything is working. And like I said, I built this game. I built it at least 10 times before this. So if it breaks, I don't know what to do. I really don't. I've been working on this for multiple days trying to fix this problem now. Like I've told everybody the video would be out so many days ago. It should have been out January 2nd at the absolute latest, but I ended up finding 4 or 5 errors that were not happening in my other project that I didn't find until I started recording. So here we are. All right, we seem to be able to pick up items fine. Even the new items we just added worked just fine. Let's try to save. All right, so we should have our inventory saved now. Let's close out of that, and we can go into our build folder, just right-click, show and explore. Go back to the main folder, which mine's called YouTube Inventory, into your build, and let's rerun the game and try to load. And there we go. Everything seemed to load. So everything is working correctly now. And you don't have to make these changes if it's working for you, but I do still suggest getting rid of the get item dictionary and just using the items array directly, because we are only using get item in 2 places, so you might as well use the items array directly. I'm just going to go through and check and see if there's anything else that I did that I should tell you about. These are debugs that I added in. If you see anything that's different while I'm looking through these, feel free to change your project to look the same as what I did in here. Because I did a lot of stuff while I was trying to figure out what the problem was. So there's no telling if I maybe changed something somewhere that I didn't make up, that I completely forgot that I did. All my files are also uploaded in the description below, and you can just download the project. I even have my tester project uploaded to there, so it's called the 1.5 refactored. I'll leave that one up in case somebody's getting errors in this version. They can download that one and see if they're also getting errors in that version. So I'm just going to scroll through most of the files so people can take a look and see if there's anything different with my files than what they have, while also trying to remember if there's anything I've changed. That's one of the get items we changed, I think. Okay, I'm pretty sure I showed you everything that I changed. It was mainly just this. This is where the error was happening. Well, it wasn't even really here. It was serializing the IDs out fine. It was when we were using the add item, somewhere in between add item, the ID it vanished somehow. Which it might have something to do with, but I'm not thinking about it anymore. It's working, and that's all that matters. And it's still even doing the IDs automatically, which I might change this from on after to serialize and on before serialize to using an editor window and just having it update in the editor window. That would probably be better than doing it this way because it doesn't need to run any of this code while the game's running anyways. And how we're doing it right now, it will rerun this while the game's running, which is completely unnecessary. So we probably will change this to an editor window at some point. I was actually looking into doing it right now, but I spent so much time just trying to get it working at this point that I just want to get this video out, and we'll move on from here and we'll figure it out. Maybe I'll read some of the comments in the video below and see if any other people are getting the same errors I was having. But that should be everything. We should have it all working. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope when I edit it that it's going to turn out decent, because it's going to get hellish near the end with all these errors I had. It's been so frustrating. It's been difficult. But it should be working now. And like I said, maybe nobody else is even going to have this problem. I really think it's just a Unity serialization problem, and probably has something to do with the abstract classes we deleted that were extending the item objects. But I don't know. It could also have something to do with how we are serializing and deserializing inside of here. And maybe the error is still here and it's just not showing itself to me right now, and it's going to just appear again. Who knows? If it does, we'll figure out a way to fix it. If it doesn't, hooray. But have a wonderful day. I'm going to go back to editing this because I've literally been in the middle of editing the video while recording more parts to the video, because I was just going to leave you without showing the update that I did to the inventory to get it to stop showing bones for sure. And then when I was recording the part to show you how I did that, just a slew of errors just started appearing one after another. But I think I fixed them all, and it should be working. So have a wonderful day. It would really help me out a lot if you comment on the video and like and share. Yeah, it would help a lot. All right, well, see you all in the next video.